Sanje tam je jeng o ere tan je khor jam su chabda ka den somba me ba pan kon tin chen lam ma tam be shab je de ma me ba lang ko rab de de ke be san sa shin jab sun je sin je la paran je de so Pardin Zavala Marambo, Da Kenyan Karbe Med Yola, Garden Chimbe Gone, Gibson de Kosong to Jingle, so Yonde Sanje Kunda, Yamna Yang, Kade Sanje Gome, Lopeng, Zavala Meshavla, so on the Rolo Dambe, Chela Jeva, and the Kanda Sobjeton, Jetina, the Shilomar Jeba, Consoda, and the Timbe Chujen Chimbe. Simbaran de Batam Gender She, Namaria Tambala, Gedala, the Jinke, Drum Data, Mekinam Dan, Roa, Kunjeta Kechamba, Tamjeke, the Dage, Chute, and Tadaring also de la Yanja Chutunjin go to Joshua, and Bemasi Joshua.
So we begin another session of Dharma, and I'm really happy about it.
This is any Namju Chishedu, the Shishule Capsule. Tang Mundo Tang Muyas in the Chula de Chinigoni, use.
And as I usually explain, there's more than there's different stages to practice of any kind of Dharma. There's not only the main actual practice, but there are preliminary practices, preliminary stage to work with. So what I'm going to be speaking about for the actual session of our practice is on the subject of how do we dispel problems and suffering, and how do we bring into existence peace and happiness. And in brief, the discussion of the Four Noble Truths, to look at that subject. So that's the main topic tonight.
Today, this is
But first of all, a preliminary explanation leading into talking about the Four Noble Truths.
Chu Nimba Inanda, Chu Sheba Inanda, Chiranzo de Nimba Pori, Nanda and Chun Sheba Pori, Chun Chini, Niba Bungunayang, Kulong Nabartapa, Sheba Bungunayang, Kulong Nabartapa, Kulong you at the Pemasicage Moris.
So whenever we're attending to Dharma teachings, it's very important that both the listeners and the teacher, or the one who's speaking, both have pure motivation. It's very important. So what did you come here for this teaching of Dharma tonight? You have to examine your own mind first. What was the reason? Why did you come?
Nimba Wangden Done, Chushiata, Nimba Wangden Done, Chiat, the Yonsi de Pena, Chado, Jinsem Dang. Any Trana Yipena Chiram to Chunini Capsuina, Chindi, Dogutang, any Nordang, any Peshatang. That the Nijiki cheat, net and Matsa, the Nugget cheat, Chushuaina, Nimba Wangers.
So there could have been some negative sort of attitude or intention going through our mind. You know, they might have had some jealousy or some competitiveness in our mind, or or we may have been thinking of some things that were not as far-sighted as they could be, such as some success or fame in our life, or making a living for ourselves, or even for some temporary healing. It's not the ideal kind of motivation with which to approach the teaching.
Today you jane ta kandachi samno tangore sina ren chudan dela de chadu ta nangpan thadanyam be simji thamji rang tadu dewan de ba rang tadu dongham de ba jibari.
Rather, the thing to do is to merge ourselves in the feelings of all living beings and feel how it's the same for all. Just like myself, want to experience happiness, peace, do not want to experience sufferings, pain, frustration, and thinking that it's for this purpose, it's for this universal aim that I tend to the teachings.
The dungete any pesha muta khamba zubo yo ba yuchi mo yo ba the dungete ngachi dungete start ko yo ma dile dungete ta no nunbe yo yo pesha mambo yo ba ju mambo yo ba ti ngachi dungete yo ba start ko yo ma ta dungete kare ka sar go yo re sina dungete sosi lo ju jor dang sim ju jor dang sa ya ri.
And we see that that no sorts of material means can dispel sufferings. I mean, even no matter how much wealth or how beautiful our house is, it won't work to clear suffering, to clear pain from our lives. Rather, the only method to really accomplish that is to bring about inner transformation, to change our mind, transform our inner being, our mind.
Today in the Chane, that this same figure tayate, and Chulok Kanong Latine, that Chukang the Chulok Latine, Pena, the Yeshuinanda, Nambayinanda, that Digoni, Tadu Chulok, Objong Sene, and it's Sosu Numong Nimbola, and it's some of down there. That's Sosu dancing the Numong Nimbola, and Sosu Ranjun the Tapsine.
So, whatever Dharma tradition we attend to or practice, so in whatever system it is that we're following, ideally the idea is to use the tenets of that system, the reasoning, the point of view, the perspective of that system, to bring about that transformation of our own mind, and in particular to bring down that sense of self-cherishing, of self-importance, self-grasping and cherishing kind of ignorance, so selfishness. So that's seen as the method to use that system, that perspective of the whatever Dharma system it is that we practice, to apply it to bring down our ignorant pride, selfishness, which is at the source of the suffering.
That ring I should choose yet, that paper nanchu share you the Jane, paper nanchu there, that Tubachi boss in Mahayana share you. They took Bachim Bichul and Rota Mondosia, so to some Chichona, some Bajachichona today.
So we're attending to a Dharma that is of the Mahayana, the great way teachings, and as such, they become that Mahayana, the Great Way teachings of Buddha, or not, completely in dependence upon our attitude, we develop a very vast kind of attitude, and it takes on that character of being the great way teachings of Buddha, Mahayana. So that's why we need to think here, that it's for the sake of all beings throughout space that I'm going to listen to these teachings. And also, with that, have the intention that I'm not just going to listen to this, but I'm going to apply it in my life from this day forward for that purpose of benefiting, bringing as much benefit to living beings as I can. So if we set our motivation in this way, then we're setting the pure motivation of bodhicitta. This is the way to set our motivation for these teachings. So again, this is not just to be words, just to be spoken, but to be felt, to be meditated upon. So let's actually do this now in our mind. For a minute, we'll meditate on our intention, our motivation, and be vastly heroic in your motivation. Setting this vast motivation that I'm going to listen to these teachings for the benefit of all living beings throughout space. And I'm going to apply it in my everyday life as best I can.
다 공도시바 나지바리 딱 나랑 랑주세바 나고 타다냐면 심지 참아 아니 심지 참아 심지 탐지 아니 대반대바 동하면 돼봐 딱 지바리지.
So as we said before, all living beings like ourselves want happiness, don't want to experience suffering.
다디 다당랑주 다 뇽주게 동해에 간다지 요래시나 다 르철레 팀베 동할지당 심설레 팀베 동할 저땅 거니 남당 거니 차반 되지지 동할 동해지 동할 열 동할시네 다 동할라 남바 순 거니 시작이 요때 이내 다 르주고는 용들이 동할지다 심주고는 용들이 동할 이유리시.
So we can talk about sufferings being experienced physically and mentally. Now there's a threefold category of suffering of pain, suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering. But where these are experienced is on the basis of either of those two, our body or our mind.
대라 산지 좀 되게 당보 휴중 콜로 거는데 덴바 이제야 돼. 다 남부 추그 동전 나오대. 휴대. 다 덴바 이제 차대. 대디자네 산지 좀 되게 콜로니 동갑 정원에 아니 자요 와라나시 아니 덴바 이제 추도 송유리시.
So the first teaching that the Buddha gave on this subject was the Four Noble Truths, which is like the very foundation, very pillar of Buddha's teachings, which he gave this 2,500 years ago, approximately.
야, 요 와라나시.
So there at Varanasi in India.
근데 이제잖아요. 갑대도 추송도 담보 산지 좀 되게 동해 시바라사, 금종 빵마라사, 고빵 운두사, 남주라 템브라사 하시네. dinjingo tugu chete de jisong yurishi.
So first he introduced the Four Noble Truths. He said, recognize suffering, abandon its causes, manifest the end of suffering, and rely upon the path. Have the path.
Tene de zane, ta donghar shibar saasya de kandaji tinga yurishina, donghe de ngachu tata kalsong koala chamba kapsu, ani chi ta mamboji ke donghe de donghe yimba chi hako yumare, donghe de sanji chomdi de sumba nanji, ani mazangwa la zangwa, mataba la takwa, dami bala dad, ta tene chi ke donghe wala dewa, sinji lo yik tawe chingne, ani ngachu donghe de dewa chi la, ta mamboji ke manjinsi.
So in explaining how we need to recognize suffering, Buddha was pointing out the fact that we don't recognize a lot of the suffering that we in fact experience, where we mistake what is actually suffering for happiness and seek it, or we mistake that which is actually transitory for something permanent, and we mistake that which doesn't have any essence or true self as having some kind of essence or true self. And in this way, we experience suffering without recognizing it. So when we first ask somebody, how are you doing? Then we're liable to get, very quickly, oh, I'm fine, as an answer.
딱 칼라사야 요바다 모라 요바 강바 요바 아니 나차미바 든디치 그 짬나 띠네 아니 나데와 인시 나데와 인시. 다 대장라 아니 같이 대와 탈도 받은 원진시네. 그래서 대가 요리시.
And we say that, we would say we're fine based on merely the fact that we aren't experiencing any pain in our body, if we have enough to eat, we have our needs being met, and we say we're fine, which in Tibetan Depo, it actually means I'm happy. No, I'm comfortable, I'm fine. You can say fine, but it does have that sense of I'm happy, I'm blissful. But and we tend to recognize that as the ultimate. That's happiness.
애도 전에 산지 좀 되게 그냥 빠사 그 동해 타도 받을 가는 소리 되시나 내지 그 동해야 돼. 동해지 동해당 저래 동해대 맞지 사막 원 추고 요리 시에고요 말. 동해 빵까슈 때 가르치는 은혜 동아 빠사 엄마한테 다 뮤직 동해 샤반 뮤직 동해 엄마한테 빵고 요리.
And so what Buddha explained that we need to abandon in particular is that compounded suffering. Just that state of being trapped in a form that is subject to suffering. Because the other two kinds of suffering, of pain and change, are relatively easy to recognize, when they happen. But this really being bound in the type of life form that can experience those sufferings at any time serves as the basis, on the basis of which these sufferings are compounded and created. That's the actual very root suffering that we need to overcome, that Buddha explained we need to recognize and abandon its causes. So the suffering of pain is like having a wound or a boil on our skin that's obviously painful. And we can apply different means, external means, like some kind of ointment to apply or medicine to take to sometimes be able to remedy those kinds of problems, right? But as long as the inner cause of that problem, if it's a tumor or a boil, that's not addressed, then it doesn't matter how much we try to treat the symptom. Eventually, the root cause will kill us. So, in this way, it's similar that we need to get to that root of the suffering, that root suffering, which is that compounded, pervasive suffering, which follows us in whatever state of samsara, of cyclic existence that we take birth in or that we live in, and get to the root of that and uproot that. That's what we need to actually accomplish. So is there a way that very root, that very root cause of suffering could be abandoned? So there's many explanations in Buddhist teachings of taking suffering onto the path, transforming it into the path, developing realizations on the basis of the path, or experiencing happiness because of suffering.
다 대인이 자네 다디 동해 때 동her 시작돼 다 네 동her 때 mendu 다 동her 때 네 되고요 말. 다 mendu 자네 디 동her 그 주에 가와란다고 잖아. 다 동her 주에 제 주시네. 삼는 이바데 가야 되지.
So the second thing we need to apply ourselves to is then what is the cause? What is the cause of this suffering? What creates it?
동해 코랑을 갑대 자데는 다들 꼭봐.
So if we just stay there sort of challenging the suffering or reacting, trying to fight the suffering or something like that, it would be a very silly way of proceeding.
왜나 저세 시와라게 동할의 용띠 요소도아. 동할의 용띠 넘버 2소도아. 동할의 용띠 가리시나 이야 동할의 용띠는 조에 쪽 봤어와신 코아빨라 인지 제 들런제 게라 가시. 동할의 용띠 되게 좋아지. 나라는 동할지 요나 심지 담질 아카 삼바 나랑을 동할 용도 짜네 디 동할 줌치는 띠네 디 동할 때에 심지 담질 용나 간호사 삼바 심지를 좋아지 고와라 좋아지 인지지.
So the great master Shantideva, Indian master Bodhisattva Shantideva, talks about 4 positive qualities of suffering. So first of all, that it causes you to be disillusioned with the endless, essenceless cycle of suffering, of the rat race. To be disillusioned with that, and also to feel sad about the fact that there are so many living beings who are experiencing these kinds of problems and suffering. So that kind of disillusionment with something we actually need to get disillusioned about.
예, 동하시고 교회 득바스나 나라는 나잔데 침보요나 나사를 렘데 나잘 마차야라 양빈도 요래지.
A second quality that Shantideva talks about in suffering is that when we ourselves personally experience it, it draws down our pride. It undermines, it destroys our arrogance and our pride, which is a good thing.
그래서 임제도 아니 이제도 교회 득바스 호와빨라 인지지.
And then it can help us to develop compassion for samsaric beings that are caught up in that cycle of rebirth, suffering. And when we experience suffering for ourselves, it causes us to develop more compassion for them. So there's another good quality to be found in the suffering. And then fourthly, it causes us to therefore shun the causes of that suffering and to delight in positive actions, virtuous actions.
동해 랩 살리값을 동해라 갖다 잡대나 답에 꼭바르지. 답에 꼭바.
So when suffering, arrives and we just sort of flail away at the manifest suffering, it's a sign that we're acting stupidly.
동하 미니소요 말. 참말은 동해요. 잠벨린 참망 아침 고와시다. 참망 고와나는 요로와. 고와나는 윤회종데 고 동하리.
So for whoever is caught in that cycle of death and rebirth, called samsaric beings, the nature is suffering. There's always that underlying nature of suffering.
빼나 나랑을 찾지잖아. 나랑 그 냠냠고 돈이 동해 땅 강알 햄니 값을 삼로 돈다 찾지잖아.
For instance, to take my own personal experience, when I experience adversity and problems.
다 동해 때문에 랩니 값을 동해 람도 치야 돼. 갈래 가버리. 마게나 동해 람도 치네. 지 동해 대화를 주네. 동해 그 찌네 똑바지야. 동해 그 찌네 지. 다 주야 본도야. 다 근데 가버리. 이네 동해 때게 소소를 나차 다야다. 소소를 안 쉬자야. 근데 마고 사지 마솔라 또 닌시그나니고 람지데 마세야 다 되실 것도 요라.
So it's difficult. You know, it's not something that's easy to do, to transform suffering into happiness. You know, but you know, we at least want to transform it to the effect where it doesn't destroy us. You know, where it doesn't make us sick, or it doesn't cause us, you know, to commit suicide.
배나 안데 지나 탕나 다 동해도 강하던 렘니 값에 탕나 마데네. 단데 지 호와 코란 거 안신라 호와 코란 거 안신라 동해 안신을 마도 매드잖네. 들려 마도 노사요 말이 sabsan다지. 호와 코란 거 안신데 동해 거 안신이 잖네. 다 나야 동해 거다니 맞지. 근데 잖네. 뭐네 린도와 다 동해 린도와 삼삼. 대래장 지기와 스마르디 동해데 레브나 동해데 깔바 망보지라니 냐와도 예다라송다 든지라 지야인데 잖네. 루틴디 토니 따다냐오나 루틴디 냐오나 고추바지 냐니 고추바지 연거도 사사.
So, at the very least, what I would do is sit down and contemplate and think. You know, it's no wonder that these kinds of problems, sufferings are occurring because we're in samsara. Everything in samsara results in suffering. That's just the nature of it. So it's no surprise, you know, that this kind of of suffering could occur. And you know, if the causes of this suffering, you know, which is obviously coming from karmic causes, if that was to be experienced later on, in a worse state of existence, like a hell realm or a hungry ghost realm, it could be much worse than to go through this suffering now in this human life. And so in that way, I can see it as serving a purpose of purifying that negative karma that would be experienced, you know, much worse later on, and say this is serving a good purpose now, this inevitable suffering of samsara.
Today the jane tapi dunghe teang rang zu ya ba je ma to me yimbe ngarang na chi yala zo unje da ji me yimbe ngarang na chi nu ji inje da chi zawa ni de ma wa dungha se ya de ngarang gu zu ne do thang ni lang na ngo le jam na cha ngarang gu zu do wa dunghe ki ju da ka re chi na kum jong de ba nge ju do wa.
Then in thinking about that suffering, then I don't think, now this was created by such and such a person, someone else, you know, other than myself. Because in understanding the second of the Four Noble Truths, the causes of suffering, we understand that the root of this basic problem of being caught in samsara, in this suffering situation, is within my own being. It's within my own mind, my own attitudes and actions, delusions and karma. So I'm the one that's created it. So that's another kind of perspective that will come to my mind, saying no one else has created this problem, this suffering. I'm the one who's created the causes for it.
The Dege Samnotang, any the Deja Chimbo Samnotang Matanayang. That chick don't hear you lick up so tongue, I don't tamala don't hear you. The day the Janet don't hear Lemmy capture. That Chunjung Jil Samnotang. And they don't hear the Narang Chipomari. Samala de Dunga Young the Yuri, Sambaji, Paloja Chimboji. But that simply Sama Dunga Ranjili, Naran Chipomari Sambaji, Pena Meladunga Lemmy. Nala Karis in the Dunga Levis. Nala Mamabot in the Jagado. Matsama Chibodos. Nala Peshamandos, Nalan Kambamando, Nala Nachipo Karis. The Koran Mato, Sorku you married the Yin. Sama Dunga till chest Yura, the Inditane. But they don't have Samala Yuri Sama. The Niji Samota, Loja Chimbochis in the Pigrish.
And then we can expand our attitude more to think about the fact that I'm not the only one that's experiencing this kind of suffering. But it's the same with all other living beings that are caught up in samsara. This can help, because otherwise what people tend to do when they get caught up in self-pity is think that, everything's going wrong for me, and I'm the only one that this is happening to. Everyone else is happy, and this is all happening to me. But by realizing, no, that's not the case. That's a mistaken idea. And to understand that just as I have these kinds of problems and suffering, so do all other living beings. And so it's to start to develop this kind of vast attitude of really taking responsibility or feeling for the welfare of all living beings, developing this vaster kind of attitude. And this can give us inner strength. It can be beneficial. Go that. And like we say, just to realize that we're not alone. That we have company in our suffering. I just want to remember that one point too.
소소라 동해 간지 요나야 빼는 나차다 독작 같이 메인 독작 뒤도도 깨서서 안데 지 독작을 나차던데오나 그 랩지 동안에 랩차로 와 르르 동해지 다 독작네 독작지 랩네 르르 동해지 랩차데 문지 렉 아 생의 동해도 조도 뭐조도 소소 라발로 와 레레장 다 동해 코란 걸 안시는 랩차도 sambaji tendeche samno tangna ta telema to rosami baji ko donghe ge ranjin de donghe ge phungbo yin de donghe ge phungbo la donghe ge phungbo khun ro de ge de chane ta telema to rosami samba le chang ane simji chamal ta nang ta da nya be simji shuda shunda wala nga ge donghe tendeche yo na ti donghe de chama de ngarang chibog le tholam min shu 이 심지 대남지 나고 차오 내 나차도 참마도 나랑 링크 인상 봐. 근데 저 돈이시네 심파 자친 보세요잖아. 동해 남도 쳐야 돼. 동할 때네 뜻바 다셔야지.
Okay, so say some serious illness. We've already contracted something, very serious like cancer. That's already happened, and that's the physical suffering. But as for our mental state, that's in our hands still. It doesn't necessarily have to be also suffering. We can think about it as I was just saying. To think, okay, this is the aggregate of suffering. This is a samsaric aggregate, which means it is the nature of suffering. Of course, suffering is going to arrive to it. So rather than, get distressed about it, to think, okay, if that's the case, then what about all the other living beings who are caught up in this same situation, same kinds of sufferings? If only my own suffering alone could serve to free all of them, to alleviate the sufferings of all others.
근데 삼노지 담바이나 동해 들렸디네 아니 심지 나랑 뜻바 다야다. 근데 요거도 와.
And so through this vast intention of inner strength, embodying kind of inner strength, it has it has profound effects on us. What it will do, first of all, is that it will purify ourselves. It's a very powerful, positive state of mind that will cause a tremendous purification of our karma if we really generate that thought very sincerely.
And this is support tajisite. So and this is what ma tang kapsu. And it rang the chet sunam tang. And it only got tawa, Sanjo sim tang. Now got a yuan think chuk under Giona, they chap you do. Don't have not the sim ji de nam, Michigan, Timson, Sabasi. 시 오얀 지바든 냠데 아니 랑가 나차 된다와 심지 술요나양 아니 요즘 나보시는다다 나홍나니 왜 나보고 쳐되니 랑가를 돌아 냥송 삼바 대련이 정도의 심지 탐지가 내다 나차도 공아랑 기부가 줄이지 지긴 삼바 너는 생각하다 좋아다 기부거네 너지 제바이나 누가 남도 쳤으나야다 뒤에서지 sem마 핑도와.
And so then to take that into the Tonglen kind of meditation, the giving and taking meditation, synchronizing it with the breath, that as we breathe out, realizing that at the same time white light goes out from our own being, from our own heart, with all of the positive energy and qualities of oneself and others, and the teachings, the blessings, and the realizations of the teachings, and feeling that it dissolves into all those living beings throughout space, and then at the same time that they're suffering, and particularly if you have one particular kind of sickness or suffering, pain that you're dealing with, to think that all of that kind of suffering or that kind of pain of all others comes in simultaneous with inhalation in the form of dark light, and feel that you're taking it, that you're alleviating that suffering of all living beings. And this can be a very beneficial way of dealing with problems and suffering.
어따디 동해에 되듯이 근데 동해에 기저대 간다지 소마레시나 다 두고니 시대잖아요. 준비라 군용거 손에 두고니를 준비했지. 다 군종거 대비 줄었대네. 동하지 대마서. 이시. 애들잖아요. 깨단 거 거네. 군종 대마 동하를 대마. 남제 대마 고버 대마시네. 단 노당시네 되지리데. 얘네 담보 산지 좀 되게 동하를 시바라서 아시네. 야, 동해 뭐는 어쩌야 돼? 군종 반도고 로 지비치데. 이래 동할 담보 어쩌야 돼? 좀 지들들들
So in this way we have a causal result relationship described with the first two truths of true sufferings and true causes of sufferings, the delusions and karma being the causes for suffering. And then in the second two truths we have the cessations of suffering and in the path to the cessation of suffering. And so in both these cases we actually get what's the cause mentioned before the result. The actual sort of timeline would be that if you create the karma and delusions, or the delusion and the karma, then you experience the suffering. And if you practice the path, then the cessation of suffering will be attained. But Buddha reversed the order. He talked about it the other way around. And in the case of the first two, he described the suffering first, said recognize it, so that we would develop the intention to abandon its causes. So there was a reason for explaining the result and suffering first. So now, regarding those causes of suffering, and particularly the delusions, delusion causes of suffering, there's many categories of delusions or afflicted states of mind, primary ones, secondary ones. There's five-fold category, a threefold category.
Ngachi gypsy nyumong ko mapang pardo tepsi tela ngachi donghar ko yum ma che pa chi yonde pere yunjo nani kade sonu sina me matang pardo lakpa chigri sina yunjo nan tade sondo wa me pena di juba de la me ji yana me ban de se de na churang ko me de ma matang pardo di lakpa de ma chigri thapchi churang kade se na yan lakpa de me chigri ani sina lakpa me la simde yura made ma tang is. The end it's an Kumyong Dembate, Kumyong Dembasinanda, New Mumbate Mapang Pater, Machitonhaki Jumachi, but the only.
So until we can abandon the delusions, we will be continuing to create the causes of suffering incessantly. So the example is given if we have a stick that's on fire. Until we let go of that stick, it's going to burn our hand.
So if
we really want to get rid of the suffering, the pain, we've got to get rid of the stick. We have to let go of the burning stick. So this is an example that's explained in Bodhicharya Avatar, the guide for practicing the Bodhisattva's way of life. So what do the causes of all these afflictions trace back to? Unknowing, lack of awareness, ignorance.
Marikpa la nge shaptin chigi siata, Marikpa nge sari chidi molam chigi siata. Marikpa ki nimbola, ta tamo ki nimbola, chig nge ta luji goni, chig san sayata, ngagi goni, chig nimba mangbo tanya. Chitang kale kale kora jana, ko nimbo chito hoyote. Ngu ki nimbola, kara kato sine, yongto ko yoma. Marikpa ki nimbo tila, rikpa ishi korange, garda chigi nimbo ti garda chigi. Shirab ishi, shirab chi yongpo yoga.
So the only thing that can act as the direct antidote for that ignorance is the wisdom that understands its falsity, that sees that it's the mistake. No other kind of antidote will work. We can't do rituals, say I'm going to do a ritual to get rid of ignorance, or I'm going to say prayers for the elimination. I mean, these things help, but they're indirect. Likewise, circumambulating or doing different kinds of physical practices of prostration, they will help, but they can't be the direct antidote. The only thing that can be the direct antidote that actually uproots completely that ignorance is the wisdom that sees through it.
Niji yonggo ayina, ta gomjan. Sim tsuksu den gomjan. Omba ni siata. Oni ka tawa. Ta dele tsayale ma to yimba mo.
So the meditation on shunyata, emptiness, selflessness. This is the direct kind of antidote, wisdom that's needed to overcome that unknowing ignorance, self-grasping ignorance.
Ta chedanga kone nyumong bala, nyumong namra mambo chiyore. Tene indi chane, ta nge te reji de dang ba kwa shine. Ta lutin de thola, ta me zangbo chi siyate. Ta nge tere de hiendo soso. Me zangbo siya, me yabo chi siyate. Ta pe masu kechi mo isi.
Chitang, so it's very important for us to be a good person, to be a noble person.
Nyumong la nyumong mambo chi siya yora. Nyumong ba siya ta mambo siya yo, tenge siya ma kwa siya.
So, I've explained a lot about these afflictions of the mind, delusions of the mind before, so I won't go into more detail on that right now.
Pena me zangbo siya te yang chi leg sui yulam ni chi mala namba tinya zang chi me zangbo siya te me chuma siya tende chi ma yin ba me tinya me sim zangbo siya ta me zubo ya bo chi ta chi nga de wo chi ta me namba slog yip zang ma yin ba sim zangbo siya ta ke chi mo ri chi.
So when we talk about being a good person or being a noble person, this is not primarily anything to do with our external appearance or the way we act or speak. It primarily, is in regard to an inner transformation, our heart, where we're coming from.
Pena samba zang na satang lam yang zang, samba ngi na satang lam yang ngi. Tamji samba ta la ra le pe, takpar samba zang na ni din sa sung duwa. 대인도 전에 삼바 장나 사다 라면 장세야 되게 매 삼바 장보지 란이그 말 삼바다 인제다 말 인피지 인도 돈이 로요 밤에 삼바 장보지지나 그런 사자 가와를 송 내가 가를 내내야 내가 람로요 봐 내가 란이그 야보쳐 봐 사다 라면 장세 슈그 손이잖아 다 삽죠다 랑와 라소바 대수 공도 편네 아니 냠보지 슈마임베 솔잖아요. 그랑 내가 사자 가와라 송 내가 가를 내네요. 내가 참만 누구요. 사방 님베 뭐지이나 이 독서 그거니 사당 람 사자 가와라 송네 삼도 만다봐. 아니 지금 말라 상인 창와 디 레드 나랑 람성 솔렘네. 아니 지금 레 람도 미봐. 다 되는 마음보지 진짜 같이 용들이 그러지.
So it's said that everything goes well for the one with good intentions, whereas the path and the destination for those with negative intentions all go badly. So everything depends upon that motivation, our intention. So place great emphasis on excellent intentions. So that's the way it is. When we have positive intentions, when we've really created a lot of positive energy through positive intentions in the past, then everything goes well for that person. Somehow the universe seems to provide all successes and so on. And if it's a Dharma practice, then one proceeds through the paths and stages as needed for that kind of development and progress, and then it will be beneficial, for everyone around oneself. Whereas if that intention is negative, if there's a lot of negative energy that's being carried because of negative intentions in the past, then there will tend to be a lot of problems and obstacles coming up. A person will meet with a lot of problems. So this is the nature of that relationship. That everything depends upon our intentions.
애들잖아요. 가담바 계획신이나베. 다 디고르도 추기 돈이 싫어요. 이네 삼바 장볼라야. 근데 남자세는 야보도 와. 가담바 계획신이나베. nga tremna nga chule na nga le chu tremna nga trumsine nyumongge 칼고는 인분동 축송스네 엔드시네 다 남진기 님보라 던데시 그거도와 다 대야 같이 근데지 마동나야 같이 삼바 장미 네 거는 삼바 당도 야보도와 삼방 임바데 들지요나 지 님말 해라 nga 좀 추좀 알로 추르시야 지금 삼바 장미 들 거라
So the ancient Kadampa masters in Tibet were very intense in their practice, this kind of watching their intentions, and they would say that if they find that the delusions are concentrating themselves, then they would fight back. And they take that as a particular moment to challenge those delusions. Whenever they say a selfish or inconsiderate thought would come up, they would immediately challenge it and destroy it. Whereas if there's no such kinds of delusions, if there's more positive states of mind, then they would relax more. But when any kind of negativity arose, they'd be especially on guard to challenge it and destroy it. Well, even if we can't, practice with that kind of intensity, at least we can set the general kind of intention to improve daily, to look at our states of mind, and if we see problems, to work at alleviating them or transforming them. But to have that kind of intention, sort of along the same lines as the Kadampa masters.
디 강니 춘되다 면도 아주 시고 말이 춘인지민 시고래 저랑 낭부 주지 저랑 예수 주지시네 서 강게 저랑 저 찐가 땅거 요 말이 소신 되바리 소신 라바리 근데 자차 자탐바 뭐야 어디 연구 가서 참아지 봐.
Okay, so I'm certainly not saying anyone should practice any particular religion. That you should practice Buddhism or you should practice Christianity or whatever. But I would say, that regardless of that, we all we all want to be good people. We all want to transform in positive ways, right?
근데지 연구하이나 단 남부추시네 다등아주 따르유부추 근데지를 이는 로정세네 애니 다들 나이시는 유몽그 님보라 딱게 근데지네 소수 유몽그 님보들 소수 갑대잖아 소수 매장보 소야린도 뭐시 매진바지급처럼 매장보 쓰시나 용야요 말아.
So regardless of that, the kinds of methods that are being presented in Buddha's teachings, a dharma system, like I was mentioning before, that has a perspective, has certain tenets, certain system of behind it by which you can undermine and destroy the causes of suffering and selfishness and in self-grasping ignorance. To bring about this kind of inner transformation, we need to have some kind of method like this, because it has to come from within us. It has to be done by us. Nobody else can say, okay, now you're a good person. Or, the transformation has to be done by ourselves from within. Now you can't example is love too much.
Yeah, your maris. And they did an Samba Zanging a dong logic, Nordic Mashi, Samba Zanging money cheaper.
So I want to tell one story to illustrate this difference of what happens with good intentions or bad intentions.
Mama Jag Lombala any money says money.
So there was these two people, two friends in India before.
Penny says
they were two brothers. Two men, two boys. So they were boys.
And Nimachila Korani Nyamdeson, Chitla Samba Maramdachi, Samba Nimbachi, Chitla Samba Zambuji, those Korani.
So they started off on a walk one day. One of them had some pretty bad thoughts or negative intentions, whereas the other one had some noble ones. And they always hung out together and did things together.
And Nimachila Yarbot and the Jeke, Dulmo Chöje Yarbochimu Jilani, that Dulmo and a Koranjin Zego, the Jachimbotin Son, any that Yarbotella Mamboch left any murders of Jabola Peshata, and Muta, that and the Mambochi, Pu, and a Koranga, Kala Mambochi, Mate, that Yarbote, and this is at your Koran lives.
So one day they arrived where there was a king who was providing great feast and generosity to the people. People were coming from all over, and the king was providing great generosity, giving them food and drink. And he was putting on some shows. There was some plays and entertainment going on, so it was a feast and entertainment. So these two boys saw the show and ate some of the food. And so they were heading back, and they sat down together at one point.
That Jarbotelam Sambak Nimbatan Jarbote Korang Tatara my Shesna Nga take Jarboke, Jarbonda, Chana, some Koranga to the G. Samlong Kondosi. Any day Samlong called the Buteke, Koran Topola Lab. Takarani Jarbot say na, Tapsi Kandis say. I see Jarbola, any say Tana, Koran Shona, Korangi say the Tugamate, Korang the Samno, the Korang Lab, Kasi Jarbot the train Shona, Na Jabo Chigaway, Na Kasi Jabo China, nature and Lumbola, Dangies. And you can't achieve it. Samba Nimba Pateka, Samba Zambi Pateka, Kita Tizi. Samba Zambi Pateka, oh, they chop a Samba Dokjaris. Jarbote, Jivan Humani Koran, Sunam Zona, Sunam San, any Panjota Donju Baris. Narani, Sunam Mapsana, any Tapango the Segura, that the Nessie, Joami Chari. You don't do the summer time, you marriage. The late Jarbote, Yang Sene. Oh, Koran Sunam Sabari, Naranga Maumba, the charge, oh, also to the Koran Sunam Yaranche Yana, Koran the Sunam, the children of Toger is, and they call Kelang, my budget.
So the one with the bad thoughts and intentions, as they were sitting there, then said what he was thinking. Said, you know, that king, he's just thinking about wanting to be a king again. He's giving all this generosity to the people because he's thinking, I hope I can become the king again. Now, how about if you kill me now so that I can become the king, and then you can become my minister? So then the good son said to him, no, this is very bad what you're thinking. It's because of the king's own past merit and virtues that the king has become like this now, and so he's creating more of that same kind of energy now. How much better if we were to rejoice in this action of the king, rather than that. So whereas the bad one was thinking to take over the kingship and somehow, the good one says, well, how much better wouldn't it be better to simply rejoice in what the king is doing?
The Korani Manchamne, Purchase the industry, that Langali, that Korani Trambonda, she said, Tango, Bango, the next place.
Yeah, and furthermore, the good one, the one with the good thoughts, said, you and I are beggars. We're poor now because we haven't practiced this kind of generosity in the past. Wouldn't it be better for us to rejoice, in this generosity that we received? And rejoice.
Rejoice.
I was wondering about this word Yirang in Tibetan.
This one.
So then they had an argument. So they got kind of they had falling out, and they separated, and one they fell asleep by the road. So they both were sleeping in different places.
Jabodel Boyomari, Dulmo Chöje Boyomari, Koran Boji Goyo, Boy Chapti. And you could Kasa Kala, Burtende Yamchinji, May Yamchinji, the Dua Mendoxina, Yobot and the Tongue, the Chiri. And the Yobot did at the birthday, the Samba Zamboji, the Sun needed Tongu. Kola Wu Kensaji, Yinkani, Ango Pugotilla, the Kensaji Tongu. Any Jabola Shuna. Magi Langala, Pugi Nindosi. There are Kens our own Chidosi. Tenite Kandichigo City, Yati, Yati, any Jarbot, that is Samba Zambo Tanite, Lamsan Jarbo take Pugla Cha, any Jarbo Jassi Jang, the Jarbo Jat, Pug, Jabusi Charis. The Sambang in Batanite, Lamsang Le Min, and Shindang Kolokil, Tamnan,
So these two boys then had a very kind of instant karma in this case of this story, whereas the one with the negative intentions had his head cut off by a passing charioteer's wheel, whereas the other one was sleeping on the ground somewhere, and the king was childless, and he was looking for a son to adopt, and he sent his ministers out, and the ministers saw this boy sleeping there, and there was a kind of a strange radiance about him, some light coming from his heart, and so he went back to report this to the king, and the king ended up adopting this boy and becoming the prince.
What the day in the Tane? Oh, the day in the Tane, any Angachim Lutin de la, May Lutin top Sadu, and the young's toy Kalekaborish. I'm John Dennis shit in Yabaka, so you're in Madon, then lay Laos in a Toyo Mai. Hajan Kalekaboy. In the Ni Sadu, you've seen no village of Zachis on you. Then the Ni Sadu, then Ni Damjogo Mulu Rinpoche, Ni Sadu, that is not no village of Zachis on the Bechan. That is Zachit and Machete, social away. Mazamboji Sena, Zachimboroa, Murdojaji Sena. Caught the rain machi shows in the Monataya, Tamate Ravaya Madukachi in the Tamjur Milirimbochi in the main tag was Madoa. Jim Balarepe Jet Tamjur Milu Guns on the Chun Ravanton, the Kunjumi on the Telesondoa. Jet on Tamjur Milirimbochi, the Kumbo in security. Kumbo Sita Mizzi, Yabo Sita Mizzi, social lava. May Aboji say, May Abo, Samba Zambochi, Medicina. I'm your Gumulu Rinpoche said, Muneman Tacho. There, my imp and mud dog Jadisina. Oh, caught Tatan in my shade shows in the Mamabuchi Mula Jagadoa. Copa Mina Yaksa is energy. I think San Zabel in the Porsche Dam must say Damada see the Nitasuti. What? They did Tane. Lutin de Tony. Young's Kalekabori, Tamjo Gumulity. The nature is at the Major Zambosia. Social Maya Bodhisattva, Bemasika. They see the Mizite, Machi Lapan, that's social lapa.
Mission do such saying, the Katsushina Yagres, Yagasa, Mission that Michik do such chena. Kankyokyo Shina Yagres.
The key, Leonasum, Ronso you are. That they to Tamjum Mulu Rinpoche Siate. Haja Zachimbuchi Zayura, Zachimbusia, the Muller of Pasia, Muller Pinta, Mulachi, Abusia, the Teleshake Yamato, Medukachi, Tamjo Mulirimbuchisia.
Tata. Indeed, got to cast on a younger. Okay, so you need to understand, realize that this human body that we have right now is something that's very precious. It's very difficult to find. It doesn't just come for no reason at all. It's very difficult to get this kind of this life form, this human form that we have now. But once we've attained it, whether it is to be something that's very meaningful and precious, that's in our hands. That lies in our hands, because if we are developing ourselves in the spiritual path, using our life for benefit of others, then it really is a precious human life, what we call the precious human life. But if someone or anyone is using our body for destructive purposes, hurting a lot of other beings, engaging in war, and so on, then it's not precious. It's nothing too precious, and in fact, it would be almost better if it's over sooner than later. It would be a more compassionate kind of thing to wish that someone or ourselves would be finished sooner with negative actions. So it lies in our hands whether we really make our human life a precious human life or not.
That the end is an attack from John de Bassi. 다 금종 된다지가 빵차를 지라 아니 다 간다지 시네 금종데 맞다 다 금종데 간다시네 빵거시나 아니 이거든요 다 남짓된 바스야 돼.
So then how are those delusions, ignorance, gotten rid of? How are they abandoned? How is this cessation of suffering manifested? It's by using the path, by practicing the path.
다들 남짓된 바스야 되라요. 다 아주 추스야 돼. 다 아주 벽 남부 추는 다 추시 시어요. 디 추되라. 다르와이순 근데 지금 돈이 다 제단 거는 로요. 대도 자네 다 제단 거는 룡아 이게 추대 쪼리데 쪼쪼데 바 공드시 바 난이 고 말에 바 님보 난제 님보데 생 코란 그 난이 전이 거야. 이 자네 아니 다추 야슈스난다 앙당보데다 생구주 나 소구주들이 검자야 돼.
So when we talk about the true paths, then we're talking about the Dharma. This is what we mean by the Dharma in Tibetan Buddhism. And Dharma is practiced by the body, speech, and mind. But as I've explained before, the practices of body and speech are mainly rooted in the mind, and it's only that mental practice of Dharma, or that wisdom, that can serve as the direct antidote to the ignorance that is the root of suffering. So that it's that mental practice, it's the mental development, which is the supreme of all of them, and so it's primarily that which must be practiced here for the true path.
다들 남짓된 바데 라떼네. 근데 다들 톱사 가려요 있으나. 다지 다 된데지 깔래 잡 된데스 깔래 잡도 니몽 빵장네 마도 아니 메나 다들 깔래 잡을 거 맞춰 가래. 다 니몽 빵서 자리 차라 아니 돈이 그 따와 온도 찌네. 다들은 거버대 마시.
So it's until the delusions are eradicated that we'll continue to experience suffering. So when it's by so by understanding that emptiness, shunyata, selflessness, it's through that understanding that we can manifest the cessation of suffering, the ending of suffering, by that eradication of the root cause, the ignorance.
다 돈이 그 따와들라양 다 니트 란자를 사주 선바시네. 다 제단 거니 특바로 맞순 거니 지더라. 따와 지정 남으라 유리시다. 소수로 가르치요 나야 소수냥.
Now there's different levels of subtlety, or different ways that this philosophy of shunyata is explained, meditated upon in relation to the different vehicles, the Shravaka, the Pratyekya Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So any of those kinds of perspectives, or what's called the view of shunyata, that can be developed is very good.
아니 디 돈이 디 따와도 유래 제차도 다 다기 나추 당보 용사 다 동해서야 돼. 다 주랑 짠나양 주랑 그 인지민이 동아 짠는 송대야 동아한테 맨 짠다 디니 못들 요 말이지. 그 니마샤나 문바미바 난시. 니마샤나 그 문바 요 말와. 디니 못들 주랑 동해 짠는 송대네 주랑 동아를 라고 말이지.
So once you've developed this insight into emptiness, into selflessness, then you won't be able to find suffering even if you look for it. It's just like when the sun shines, the darkness disappears. There's no darkness to be found.
동해인데 그러면나 다 돈이라 바차시네. only la me basi, omanila, a lamjit de basiata, that de me basia, de la revacia.
So we all wish to be free of problems and suffering. And so, as the means to do that, we need to familiarize ourselves with this idea of what is meant by selflessness or ultimate truth, shunyata, to plant seeds in our mind through our investigating it and trying to understand it, to plant seeds and imprints, predispositions in our mind for becoming able to understand it.
다 동해 레리 가서야 공도시바 나지. 다 동해 코랑나 갑대 맞아왔지네. 다 동해 그 주드 간데린다. 주드 가와니 용도. 주드 속주도. 아니 다 주드라 아니 님보 람제 대바. 람제 덴발라 띠네. 아니 다 돈이가 다왕 거고 대바. 다 된지요.
So rather than just fighting the suffering without any clear vision, to look for its causes, what is the root cause behind it, and then to abandon it by relying upon the path of selflessness and understanding shunyata in order to manifest freedom from suffering. This is the kind of process we're talking about here.
Yeah. 아니 같이 주소 창소로 와. 아니 참되는 야가.
I think we're about through our time today. Maybe we'll wind up about here.
We're done. 아니 이렇게 좋아요 나.
Anyone has a question?
때문에 아주 좋아진 것 같아요.
So we have this one question from Kim, which is, I think, a bit related to the subject tonight, which is how is it possible that he, Rinpoche, the Dalai Lama, and other masters are able to be happy in the midst of the world's sorrow? Rinpoche is aware of the world and very sensitive energetically and still light-hearted. How is that possible?
I understand.
So I was meaning to address this question actually with my talk tonight. So this is. I hope that I've delivered some kind of answer to this question this evening.
다 동해 미바소요 말이 참말 동해요래 강아요래 다 동해 때라 돈이시야들라 같이 뎀바 이게나니 람지 뎀바 아니 고파 뎀바 나바도 람지 뎀바 다 디갑스 근데 님보티네 도나야 다 삼는 느끼 따나 근데 코라 동해가 아니지야지 자참 삼방고비 머장와라 힘미 힘로와살라 댕하미지 pena mazangwa tanda tsokpa tanda chinana yatha sambangombi drama tsama chi drama himbo chi tsawani yo ma chi ta chi do korang tsokpa yinde chane drama de yang tsokpa chi yore chi rowa re dok simchi de la dewa tsawani ni tsana ya dewa yo ma chi tende yinde chane ta korang donghe ge khapsong khowa tende chi yinde chane ngaranga zupo tela chi sa chi chi ta korang chi Dele mato rosa yo mare ta tagarang ri khora dunga rangi samba de chi samno ta na ta dunga ye de pingri.
So again, the suffering does exist. Everyone experiences it. It's not possible to simply make it go away, to simply get rid of it. But on this kind of basis, I was talking about the giving and taking, of the Tonglen practice, on the basis of the Four Noble Truths, and especially seeing that the true paths, that insight into selflessness, shunyata, as being the main medicine, the main remedy that's serving to that serves to eliminate suffering. But no, at least we can sit down and think of like what Buddha Maitreya said, something to the effect of, there's no fragrance around the outhouse, or something like that. Meaning that, as long as now in America the toilets are very clean, so you don't see the smell as much. Okay, so maybe you don't get the full impact of this metaphor here, but the idea is that as long as you're in samsara, that there's not going to be any place that's free of suffering. It's going to all have that quality, that nature of suffering, and to realize that it can go nowhere else in samsara. That is its nature, and to have this kind of insight, this kind of perspective, even just that kind of perspective, can help. So when we teach Dharma, it's medicine. It's medicine that's meant to be taken, incorporated. So we eat food to alleviate our hunger, right? So similarly, the use of the Dharma or the Dharma is to be applied when we have the need for it, which is when we meet with, especially when we meet with problems and suffering. So we shouldn't be a fair weather Dharma practitioner, which means that, like when everything's nice, we're having a picnic out in the sun, we're having nice enjoyment with coffee and food, and we look just like the perfect Dharma practitioner. Our mind is just so peaceful and pleasant toward everyone. But as soon as some little annoyance comes to us, then acting worse than an ordinary person, says this is not the way to be, not the way to act. Because the whole purpose of it is for those times that are difficult, to be able to use it to apply it at those times. That's the object. So there's a couple of monks that were meditating together, and one was asking the other what he was meditating on. He said, I'm meditating, which means purportedly it should be something that's that's working against that selfishness or self-centeredness, right? So one of the monks had this needle, and he tried a little poke on the monk that was meditating. So he looked over and said, "What are you doing?" Oh, he said some nasty word. What are you doing? Then the other one asked, "What happened to your meditation?"
I have a question for you, Karten.
No.
Within the Four Noble Truths, that there's suffering and there is disillusionment, and that in many ways that is a gift to take away pride and arrogance. So the question is suffering and pain desirable? Are the obstacles and the tragedies that come into our lives what we ultimately should desire.
아니 Rinpoche dungyala yunten yoba yinsa ena sem kyowo che or ni ninjeke 그래서 가서 dungyala yongwa sho 문어 야거be dungyala yongwa sho 문어 야거be
야 산지다 산 까마봐 금튼 든바 대빈시바 금튼 든바 까마봐 금튼 든바 대빈시바게 몰라 잡여리 동해서야데 제와 토마 미빠는 가랑게 득바사네 금종그 덴베 졸레티네 득바사야리 디바 차데 디 레트가 저로 마민게 요리 마도 제가 다다 유네 지 매직 노중 세네라지 매직 다다 나잠네 세나 코고 말와 제와 뭐만이 가랑은 주기알게 디 레트 다다 로데요 대인지잖아요 까마바 금편 든바게 강대 첸데 니라 라민지 린다 인도 니와 마저지 시다티 책니 등에 건조하면도 첸디 토라 동아 가려오는 거라 민쇼시 린다 인 지와 지만 가라 민모시 가인시는 지와 지만 미나 깔바 동다 만보라 니아와다 예달 제요라 다다 미나 다로 나와 가시 지기나니 다거요라 대인지잖아요 다다 민쇼송들 몰라다 다때 소수 등술 따야리 저라는 냠네 야보요 동할 람드 쳇타와다치 동할 찌 동하게 찌는 띠네 다때 동할 띠 따니 근데 지 시트바이나 저라는 등수 야보요 냠네 야보요나 몰랐다는 데게요 야 동할 랩차데 야 맥혀 떠 다가 동하지 소트라 마시바 조세는 무네 동해 칼 동해세나 때래 몰라 마다네 야라
There was one verse that was composed by the seventh Karmapa, Degen Sherpa, with that understanding that whatever sufferings he himself would experience, or anyone would experience, that it was not created by anyone else. It was created only by ourselves, the root cause of it. And so he made some kind of prayer. I don't remember two of the lines, but a couple of lines that I remember. He said, he prayed that may all the suffering that I've created in the past ripen now, in this life, now. May it not ripen in future lives. So could I take on all the suffering, what I've created the causes for right now, in this life, so that there's none left over for future lives. He made a prayer to this effect. But if sometime after making that prayer, when then we suddenly have some kind of pain, then don't get all kind of crying about it, because if we've been praying for it, so then may be better that you didn't pray for it if you weren't going to be able to handle. So be ready for what you pray for. If you're going to. So, because the kind of suffering that we can experience in the human form in a very short time is equivalent to what would take much longer time in worse states of existence. It could be whole ages of time in a hell or other states of bad, difficult states of existence. So there's that kind of consideration to think about also.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Finish. Now we pray dedication. Okay. Angge tamba semsia siya kayori. Jawa simji tamba kunong sa tayari. Uji mimi tamba chiranzu chu nimbari nge chu siya bari. Ta yapo chi ni yapo de chiwa te uji mimi tamba. Ta yong hoa tamba siya. Ta tesum changba ina gewa namda chiran ro yori. Tesum ma changba ina gewa si geyo ne yang gewa de gewa kani chi ge laman ro yori. Kechong li de de chane ta nga chu. Ani mola nyam de ma do ngi.
So we'll make a dedication prayer now at the end. Because there's the preparatory stage, the actual of setting the awakening intention of bodhicitta, the preliminary stage, and the main stage of attending to the teaching which I gave and you listened to, and remaining undistracted in that, and then finally making the dedication prayer together. And Now, if all of these three facets are present, then what we do becomes a pure Dharma practice. If any of them are missing, then there's some doubt about how pure the practice we're doing can be. So now we'll make that dedication prayer.
So na